Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a quiet house, the kind of quiet that doesn't come from peace, but from words swallowed whole. Imagine sitting at the dinner table, the candles burning too low, and the man across from you suddenly says, "You're controlling." You blink, once, twice, and wonder if he's joking, but the silence afterward confirms it. You probably won't survive this story, not emotionally, anyway. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to watch the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. Because tonight isn't about villains or saints. It's about the dangerous power of one word spoken at the wrong moment in the wrong tone. Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's comfortably embark on tonight's journey. He says it like a diagnosis, "You're controlling." The spoon in my hand pauses midair, soup trembling. For a second, I think of all the invisible things I've done today paid the water bill. Packed his lunch. Reminded him of his mother's appointment. If that's control, then I've been guilty for years. But tonight, the word feels different. It lands on the table with a thud heavier than our wedding china. People say marriages die slowly, like fading wallpaper, but sometimes they die in one syllable. He doesn't look angry, just relieved, as if finally saying it set him free. I ask, "What do you mean?" And he shrugs. "You need everything your way." His fork scrapes the plate. I want to list all the ways I've bent and compromised, but something inside me folds instead. There's a fact most couples don't admit: every relationship has a hidden manager. One person silently keeps the wheels turning while the other believes it's autopilot. Psychologists call it the invisible labor of love. It's unpaid, unseen, and unappreciated until you stop doing it. Later that night, as he scrolls through his phone, I wash the dishes alone. The soap bubbles feel warmer than his presence. I remember reading somewhere that in certain cultures, silence between spouses is seen as respect, not punishment. People still debate whether that's wisdom or denial, but as the water drains, I decide to test it for myself. Maybe silence can explain what words can't. The next morning, I don't wake him up. I don't ask about his breakfast or the car keys. I just watch him stumble through his routine, muttering when he can't find his tie. "Did you move it?" he snaps. I smile politely. The answer stays locked behind my lips. The day stretches long and weightless. My phone buzzes with reminders I ignore. It's strangely liberating, like quitting a job I never applied for. By lunchtime, he texts, "Did you forget to pay the electricity bill?" I don't reply. He'll find out tonight when the lights flicker. I eat in silence, tasting the flavor of rebellion, slightly bitter but honest. You'd be surprised how loud the world gets when you stop speaking. The ticking clock, the hum of the refrigerator, even my own thoughts grow teeth. Around 6 p.m. he calls. "Are you okay?" he asks softer now. I want to say I'm perfect, but I let the silence hum through the line. He sighs and hangs up. That sigh says more than words ever could. It's the sound of a man realizing how much of his comfort was built on someone else's consistency. There's a psychological theory about this. When one partner withdraws communication, the other goes through stages: confusion, frustration, then adaptation. The first night he's confused. He cooks pasta, burns it, eats it anyway. The smell of scorched garlic fills the air like irony. I watch from the doorway, not helping, not scolding. It's funny how quickly chaos grows when love stops micromanaging it. As I lie in bed that night, the house feels unfamiliar, like a hotel after checkout. He turns to me, says, "Are you still mad?" I pretend to be asleep. My silence isn't revenge, it's reflection. Sometimes people accuse you of control when they feel out of control themselves. Maybe he's drowning in his own failures, reaching for someone to blame. Still, I can't help but wonder, when did love become something we needed to manage instead of feel? The following morning, he leaves early, slamming the door just hard enough to prove a point. I sit by the window, sipping cold coffee, watching the street wake up. There's an odd peace in letting things fall apart. Anthropologists once observed that in ancient Roman marriages, women were expected to maintain harmony through silence, a custom called tacite nuptiae, the quiet union. It was meant to honor patience, but it also erased women's voices. People still debate whether that silence protected love or suffocated it. By the third day, I stop waiting for him to apologize. Instead, I listen to everything. The way the house breathes when the wind sneaks through the curtains. the way my own pulse steadies when I choose calm over confrontation. Control, I realize, isn't about telling others what to do. It's about mastering what you allow to disturb your peace. And maybe, just maybe, my silence is the loudest control I've ever had. He comes home late, smelling of cologne and exhaustion. "You didn't cook?" he asks. I shake my head. He opens the fridge, empty shelves stare back. "Fine," he mutters, grabbing his keys again. The door slams. I laugh quietly, the kind of laugh that doesn't need witnesses. There's a strange satisfaction in being accused of control and proving how little control you actually have over another person's chaos. When I finally crawl into bed, I whisper a small truth into the dark. Sometimes being called controlling just means you cared too much. And when caring becomes a crime, silence becomes survival. The morning after feels like a hangover without alcohol. The air in the house is thick, motionless, as if it too is waiting for something to be said. My husband leaves early again. No goodbye, no glance. Just the sound of shoes scuffing against the tile, the front door clicking shut, and the familiar echo of absence. I sit on the couch, staring at the dent his body left on the cushion. Funny how even silence can leave fingerprints. People think love fades through arguments, but most of the time it dies in the space between unspoken words. Around noon, I walk through the house like an archaeologist uncovering a forgotten site. Every object tells a story: the coffee mug with a chipped handle. He refuses to throw away the stack of unpaid bills waiting for my handwriting, the laundry basket full of tomorrow. Each one whispers that I was the caretaker, the quiet architect of order. Family counselors often say that emotional labor is invisible until it disappears, and that's exactly what I'm learning now. My silence has turned into an experiment, and he's the unwilling participant. By the second week, the cracks begin to show. He forgets to take out the trash, leaves the car low on gas, and misses his nephew's birthday dinner because no one reminded him. I don't gloat, I just watch. Observation feels almost sacred, like watching someone's mask slowly melt in slow motion. When he opens the mail and sees the overdue notice, I expect anger, but instead there's confusion. He's lost like a man dropped into a maze he thought he built himself. He mutters something about, "Why didn't you say something?" and I almost break. Almost. But I don't. That evening, he eats cold leftovers straight from the fridge. I make myself tea and sit across from him watching the television. He isn't really watching. He turns the volume up too loud. It's the sound of denial dressed as normalcy. People still debate whether silence is passive-aggressive or self-preserving. Maybe it depends on whether you're the one giving it or receiving it. On the fourth day of this new week, I wake up before him and step outside. The air smells like rain. There's something freeing about the sound of thunder when you've been holding your own storm inside. My neighbor, Mrs. Larson, waves from her porch. "Everything all right at home?" she asks, voice sweet with suspicion. I smile, nod, and tell her I'm just taking in the morning air. She lingers as if she wants to ask more. In small towns, silence travels faster than gossip. When I go back inside, he's awake. "We need to talk," he says, still in his pajamas. I nod and sit down, but he doesn't know where to begin. He rubs his temples. "You're making things weird," he mutters. I raise an eyebrow. He sighs. "You used to care more." I want to tell him that silence is caring, at least for now. Because if I speak, I might say something I can't take back. Instead, I pour him a cup of coffee, place it in front of him, and walk away. Sometimes love looks like quiet resistance. There's an odd thing that happens when people are deprived of control they project. He starts cleaning obsessively, rearranging furniture, refolding towels, as if order could substitute for peace. The irony isn't lost on me. He once said I was controlling, and now he's moving plates half an inch to the left, muttering about balance. The brain has its own defense mechanisms. When one partner stops managing the emotional climate, the other scrambles to fill the void. It's called role reversal compensation. I read that once in a relationship psychology article. It sounded clinical then. Now it feels poetic. That night, I hear him in the kitchen talking softly to himself, complaining about the leaking faucet. Usually, I'd be there handing him the wrench, holding the flashlight. This time I stay upstairs listening to the metallic rhythm of frustration. A few minutes later, there's a crash followed by a string of words I won't repeat. The faucet keeps dripping, one drop at a time, like punctuation in our unraveling story. I start journaling not out of habit, but necessity. It helps me trace the slow descent from accusation to awareness. I write, When someone calls you controlling, what they mean is they've lost control of how you make them feel. Maybe that's the truth. Maybe not. People still debate it in therapy circles, arguing over the line between care and domination. But one thing's certain: when you stop explaining yourself, the silence becomes a mirror. And what he's seeing now is himself unfiltered. On the weekend, he invites friends over for a barbecue. I don't help plan it. I simply watch him flounder through grocery lists and charred burgers. His friend Gary jokes, "Where's your manager tonight?" and they all laugh. He forces a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. I sip lemonade standing at the edge of the patio, letting their laughter float away. The truth is, he's starting to understand the cost of effortless comfort, the kind of comfort that only exists when someone else is doing the invisible work. Later that night, after the guests leave, he sits beside me on the couch. "You've changed," he says. I nod. I had to. He doesn't ask why. He just stares at the blank TV screen, its reflection catching the faint outline of our distance. It's not anger I feel, it's clarity. The realization that control was never about power, it was about care. The kind that organizes chaos, shields others from consequences, and never gets thanked for it. Before going to bed, I water the plants, a simple act of routine in a house losing its rhythm. He watches me from the hallway. "Do you even care anymore?" he asks. I turn, smile faintly, and whisper the most dangerous truth. Maybe I care differently now. Then I walk away, leaving the silence to do the rest of the talking. That night, I dream of a house where no one has to prove love by managing it. A home that breathes on its own, without reminders, without resentments. But when I wake up, the sink is full, the bed unmade, and the silence still mine. By the third week, silence stops feeling like defiance and starts feeling like oxygen. It has texture now, a soft hum that fills the edges of the house where words used to echo. He still hasn't apologized, and I've stopped expecting him to. That's another quiet truth people rarely admit. The longer you wait for an apology, the more it starts to resemble permission. And I'm done waiting for permission to exist peacefully in my own home. He moves around me like a stranger learning a new language. Every motion says, "I don't know how to reach you." The irony, I used to feel the same. Before all this, I spent years trying to reach him through small kindnesses, fresh towels, warm meals, notes in his lunchbox. Those gestures didn't make him notice. They made him comfortable. I realize now that comfort is a dangerous narcotic in marriage. It lulls both people into believing everything's fine until someone finally wakes up. One morning, I find the mail scattered across the table. A notice from the bank, a reminder from the insurance company, a flyer for a couple's retreat, promising communication breakthroughs. I laugh out loud. The universe really has a sense of humor. In family therapy, there's this concept called invisible scaffolding. It means the emotional structure one partner builds to keep everything functioning without the other realizing it exists. When that scaffolding collapses, the whole relationship wobbles. And right now, my husband's balance is gone. He tries to repair it with noise. The TV blares sports commentary, the blender roars every morning, and yet beneath it all, there's still my silence, steady, unyielding, almost holy. He's learning that you can't drown out a message you refuse to understand. I notice his small frustrations, the missing socks, the burnt toast, the forgotten meetings. Each mistake lands heavier than the last. He's finally meeting the chaos I've been cushioning him from for years. At night, he paces the hallway. I hear him mutter my name once, as if testing whether I'll respond. I don't. He sighs a long, exhausted sound and goes to sleep in the guest room. I stare at the ceiling, tracing cracks in the plaster. They look like rivers on an old map, each one leading to somewhere I no longer wish to travel. There's a theory in relationship psychology that people don't fear loneliness. They fear self-confrontation, and my silence has forced him into both. One Sunday afternoon, I visit my sister Marlene. She greets me with that look siblings have when they already know too much. "He called," she says. "He's worried." I stir my coffee. "Good," I reply, and she tilts her head. "You're really doing this silent thing?" she asks. It's not a thing I tell her. It's peace. She laughs, then frowns. "You know, in some cultures, wives stay quiet to keep harmony, but you're doing it to create change. That's kind of revolutionary." I smile. People still debate whether rebellion can look like restraint. I guess I'm the case study now. Driving home, I pass the park where we first met. The benches are still there, paint peeling, the fountain still bubbling its eternal rhythm. I remember the first time he made me laugh so hard my stomach hurt. That version of him feels like another lifetime, a man who listened before he judged, who reached for my hand before reaching for conclusions. The memory stings, but I let it. Nostalgia is a kind of grief-wearing perfume. It visits, lingers, and leaves quietly, just like he used to. That evening, I cook a small dinner for myself, just pasta and garlic butter. He watches from the doorway. "You didn't make enough for two?" he asks tone. Somewhere between hurt and hope. "I didn't know if you were hungry," I answer softly still, without meeting his eyes. He walks away, shoulders heavy with something I can't name. Maybe regret, maybe pride. Both taste the same after too long. Later, as I clean my plate, he stands behind me. "You know," he says, "this is harder than I thought." I almost laugh. "What is?" I ask, quietly. "Being ignored," he admits, his voice cracking just enough to sound human. I turn off the faucet, dry my hands slowly, then say, "It's not that you're ignored. It's that you're finally hearing the silence you left me in for years." He doesn't respond, just nods and leaves the room. There's a peculiar satisfaction in honesty that isn't cruel. For years, I thought avoiding confrontation was love. Now I see it was fear of losing the illusion of peace. But peace built on suppression isn't peace at all. It's emotional debt, and sooner or later, someone has to pay. I start spending more time in the garden. The soil feels grounding, like therapy for the hands. There's something poetic about planting seeds during emotional drought. One morning, as I'm trimming the roses, the mail carrier waves. "You two okay?" he asks kindly. I smile. "We're learning the language of quiet," I say, and he chuckles. Sounds harder than it looks. He's right. Silence is a foreign tongue. It takes time to sound fluent in it. That night, I find him sitting at the kitchen table staring at the unpaid bills. "Do you want me to handle it?" I ask gently. He looks up, startled by the sound of my voice after days of stillness. "No," he says quickly. "I've got it." There's a flicker of pride there, the kind that makes men stand taller even when they're unsure. I nod and walk away. A small victory for him, a small release for me. Before bed, I write in my journal, "Love isn't control. It's responsibility that no one asked for but you gave anyway." The words feel true enough to close the day. As I slip under the covers, thunder rumbles outside again. The same storm that once terrified me now feels like company. Because sometimes when everything falls silent, even the weather starts speaking your language. The silence has matured. Now it has rhythm, patience, and even personality. It's no longer awkward. It's deliberate. I move through my days with the calmness of someone who's finally stopped performing. My husband, on the other hand, looks perpetually startled, like he's waiting for a cue that never comes. Once he thrived in noise phones, ringing doors, closing me, reminding him to pick up dry cleaning. Now he's trapped in the soft hum of his own neglect. People still debate whether silence heals or punishes. I think it depends on how much truth you've been avoiding. A Thursday morning starts like any other week, sunlight slipping through the blinds, the smell of burnt toast, and that constant static between us. I sit at the table scrolling through my phone when he suddenly says, "You don't ask me anything anymore." His tone isn't angry, it's hollow. I look up. "What should I ask?" I say softly. He opens his mouth, then closes it again. There's no answer because the question isn't about curiosity, it's about relevance. He wants to know if he still matters in a house that used to orbit around him. He leaves early for work, slamming the door like punctuation. The house sighs in relief. Later that day, my mother calls. She asks if we're managing, which is her polite way of asking if we're imploding. I tell her everything's fine. She doesn't believe me. "You sound lighter," she says. "That's not normal when things are fine." She's right, of course. Freedom sounds suspicious when you've lived under obligation too long. That evening, I decide to clean not out of duty, but clarity. The dust on the shelves looks different when you stop resenting it. I find old photos tucked behind books, us on vacation, us laughing over spilled wine, us pretending time wouldn't change anything. It's bittersweet. In one picture, he's looking at me with pure admiration. I wonder when admiration turned into accusation. Studies say that in long-term marriages, perception often shifts from idealization to irritation after 10 years. We've been married 12, right on schedule. He comes home later than usual. I hear his car in the driveway, the hesitant footsteps, the pause before the key turns. When he finally enters, his eyes dart to the clean living room, the lit candles, the smell of something baking. "You cooked?" he asks, surprised. For me, I nod. For both of us, I say. He sits awkwardly grateful as if the chair might reject him. We eat in quiet sync, the clinking of forks, the soft scraping of plates. Halfway through the meal, he says, "I miss how you used to talk." I smile faintly. "I used to talk so much you stopped listening." He sets his fork down. "That's not fair." I meet his gaze. Neither was calling me controlling. The words hang in the air, heavy but clean. It's the first real confrontation since that night. He looks away. "I didn't mean it like that," he murmurs. "How did you mean it then?" I ask. He doesn't answer. The silence returns, but this time it belongs to both of us. After dinner, he starts helping with dishes, an unthinkable gesture before all this began. I let him. The clatter of porcelain is almost tender. "You know," he says, "I read somewhere that in Japan some couples go entire years without speaking much. They say it's a sign of deep understanding." I chuckle softly. "Or deep avoidance." He grins briefly. It's the first time I've seen him smile in weeks. People still debate whether distance preserves love or dilutes it. Tonight, I think it's both. Later, as we sit on the couch, he hands me a folded piece of paper. It's a receipt from a florist. "I bought lilies," he says shyly. "Your favorite." I unfold the paper. "You bought them, but didn't bring them home." He nods. "I wasn't sure you'd want them. It's such a small, fragile moment that my heart softens in spite of itself. Next time I say bring them anyway." He exhales, shoulders loosening. The conversation feels like sunlight breaking through a cloud, brief, blinding, but real. That night, I can't sleep. I lie awake thinking about how relationships are like gardens. They die from neglect long before anyone notices. And sometimes pruning hurts more than the overgrowth ever did. There's a psychological study about withdrawal repair cycles, how one partner's retreat forces the other into growth. Maybe that's what's happening to us. My silence isn't punishment anymore. It's compost. Something is decaying, but something else might bloom. The next morning, I find a note by the coffee pot. "Thank you for dinner. I forgot how much I liked your cooking." It's signed simply with his name, as if we're pen pals now. I smile despite myself. I pour coffee, breathe in its warmth, and think maybe silence doesn't always destroy. Sometimes it teaches. By Saturday, the air between us feels lighter, cautious, but open. We pass each other in the hallway and exchange small nods instead of glares. He even fixes the leaky faucet without being asked. When it stops dripping, he announces, "There." "Done," I clap lightly. "You're improving," I tease. He grins, and for a brief second I catch a glimpse of the man I once loved, a version unguarded and simple. That night over dinner, I share an observation. "You know, control isn't always about power," I say. "Sometimes it's about fear. Fear that everything will fall apart if you stop holding it together." He listens quietly, chewing slowly. "So, were you afraid?" he asks. "Every day," I answer. "And now," he leans in. I pause, then smile. Now I'm learning what happens when I let go. We sit there for a long time, not talking, but not avoiding either. It's a strange peace, fragile, unpredictable, but ours. Before bed, he whispers, "I don't like this quiet, but I understand it." I nod. That's enough for now. As I turn off the lights, I realize something profound. Silence doesn't just change the other person, it changes you. It rewires your instincts, softens your reflex to explain, and teaches you to survive your own stillness. And maybe that's the quietest kind of strength there is. Weeks slip by quietly, like pages turning themselves. The house has settled into a new rhythm, half conversation, half quiet truce. My husband and I orbit each other gently, no longer colliding, but not entirely connecting either. It's a strange middle ground, one that feels both safe and suspenseful, as though one wrong word could break the fragile balance we've built. Still, silence no longer feels like a weapon. It feels like a teacher, and I've become a willing student. On Monday, I wake to the smell of coffee. He's standing in the kitchen, awkwardly holding 2 mugs. "I didn't know how you take it anymore," he admits, sheepish. I smile. "Surprise me." He grins nervously, sets the cup down, and it's perfect, too sweet, too strong, but perfect because it exists. The gesture means more than he realizes. Sometimes love starts again, not with an apology, but with a simple act of effort. There's a fact about long-term couples. After years together, they stop paying attention to small needs, assuming they already know. But the truth, people change, and when you stop learning them, you stop loving them. We sit across from each other, sipping coffee in the quiet glow of morning. He clears his throat. "I've been thinking. Maybe we should talk. Properly." The word properly carries both hope and fear. I nod. Okay, I say. Then talk. He hesitates, eyes flicking between me and the window. You know that night when I called you controlling, I nod. He exhales. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. His voice cracks a little like an old hinge. Then, how did you mean it? I ask softer this time. I felt small, he admits. Everything was so together and I wasn't. You made it look easy and it made me feel useless. That confession lands heavier than I expect. It's one of those truths that rearranges the room. I take a slow breath. You know what's funny, I say. I thought you wanted me to handle everything. I thought it made you proud. He laughs bitterly. Maybe at first. Then it just made me invisible. There it is. The paradox of love. We build each other up until one starts feeling buried beneath the other's effort. People still debate whether balance in marriage is possible or just a myth we chase to feel equal in chaos. I don't rush to comfort him. For once, I let his discomfort sit there. Do you think I enjoyed controlling everything I finally ask? Do you think I liked carrying all the weight? He shakes his head, eyes glossy. I guess I never thought about it. Exactly, I say. You didn't think. You just let me. The silence that follows isn't angry, it's sober. Two adults finally admitting that love without awareness becomes dependency disguised as harmony. He rubs his face, exhausted. So what now, he asks quietly. Do we keep not talking? I smile faintly. We talk when there's something worth saying, not just to fill the noise. He nods. Fair enough. That afternoon, I find him cleaning the garage, voluntarily. When I peek in, he waves a dusty rag like a flag of surrender. I found your old bike, he calls out. The one you said you'd ride again someday? I laugh. You mean the one I bought right before life started managing me? He smiles. Yeah, that one. I run my fingers over the rusted handlebars. It feels symbolic how something once meant for freedom became buried under boxes of forgotten years. Over the next few days, small things begin to shift. He starts paying the bills, organizing the fridge, even cooking once or twice. Not perfectly, but with sincerity. And I let him. It's strange releasing control after holding it so tightly for so long. It feels like walking on a rope bridge, unstable but thrilling. There's a sociological theory about emotional recalibration in relationships. When one partner changes their behavior drastically, the other unconsciously adjusts to maintain equilibrium. Maybe that's what's happening to us. My silence forced him to grow up emotionally, and his effort is now forcing me to trust again. One evening, I catch him watching me while I read on the couch. What I ask, smiling. Just wondering, he says. Do you ever miss how things were? I think about it. Sometimes. But then I remember how tired I was. He nods slowly. Yeah. You look tired for years. It's the closest thing to an apology I've heard, and somehow it's enough. Because sometimes understanding replaces the need for sorry. Friday night, he surprises me again. Want to go out? He asks, holding his car keys like a peace offering. I blink. Out where dinner? Somewhere quiet. The irony makes me laugh. Quiet. You sure you can handle that? He grins. With you? Maybe. So we go. At the restaurant, the air feels almost cinematic. Candlelight clinking glasses, a faint jazz song drifting through. He orders my favorite dish without asking, remembering it from years ago. When it arrives, he raises his glass. To silence, he says. The kind that teaches. I smile and clink mine. And to voices that come back stronger. We eat, laugh lightly. And for the first time in months, I see him not as an adversary, but as a flawed man trying. There's an odd ritual I read about once in Italy called La Pausa del Cuore, the pause of the heart. Couples take time apart in silence, not as punishment, but renewal. They say love needs distance the way lungs need air. People still debate whether it works, but I think I understand it now. We didn't just pause to cool off. We paused to remember who we were before resentment built its walls. When we return home, the house feels alive again, like it's inhaling after holding its breath too long. As I slip into bed, he reaches for my hand, not out of habit, but choice. Good night, he whispers. I whisper back. Good night, and this time the silence that follows feels full, not empty. And as I drift into sleep, I realize maybe silence didn't destroy our love. Maybe it rebuilt it one unspoken truth at a time. The next morning feels different, lighter somehow, as if the house itself has exhaled. There's music playing softly in the kitchen, the smell of toast wafting through the air, and for the first time in months, I hear him humming. It's off-key, a little clumsy, but endearing. I stand in the doorway watching him butter toast with exaggerated precision, as though afraid to break the fragile peace we've built. When he notices me, he grins. "I was going to bring you breakfast in bed," he says, "but I figured you'd think I was bribing you." I laugh quietly. "You figured right." We sit together at the table eating in a kind of peaceful silence that doesn't demand explanation. He clears his throat halfway through. "I was thinking about what you said, about control and fear." He pauses, searching for the right words. "You were right. I was scared. Not of you, of failing." His voice softens. "You made everything look so easy, I didn't know how to keep up." So instead of admitting that I called it control, I nod, letting the words settle like dust in sunlight. It's not a full apology, but it's a beginning, and beginnings, however small, are sacred in marriages that almost drowned. There's a truth most people overlook: relationships don't collapse from a single blow. They crumble in microfractures. Small disappointments, ignored needs, repeated assumptions. Over time, those invisible cracks form canyons. Psychologists call it emotional erosion, and sitting across from him now, I realize how close we came to total collapse. Later that day, we drive to the lake. It's one of those impulsive decisions born out of rare harmony. The sun glints off the water, birds float lazily above, and for once there's no need to talk. We sit on the pier legs dangling, sharing a quiet that feels alive. "You know," he says, tossing a pebble into the water, "I used to think silence meant anger." I smile faintly. "Sometimes it does." "But not always," he asks. "Not always," I reply. "Sometimes it means peace. Sometimes it means survival." He nods, thoughtful. "You really scared me, you know, when you stopped talking." I glance at him. "Why?" He hesitates. "Because I realized how much I relied on your noise, on your presence. Without it, I had to meet myself, and I didn't like the guy I met. There's something raw in that confession, something childlike." I want to comfort him, but I resist the impulse. Comforting too soon would steal the lesson. People still debate whether pain is necessary for growth. I think it is at least the kind that doesn't destroy but reshapes. As we drive home, he reaches for the radio, but I stop him. "Leave it off," I say. "I like this silence." He smiles knowingly, and for a brief moment, I feel like we're speaking the same language again, the one we forgot somewhere between love and survival. That night, we fall into a pattern that feels normal. I read. He folds laundry. Occasionally, he asks, "Where does this go?" and I point instead of answering. It's small, but it's progress. He's learning to function without instruction. I'm learning to trust him with imperfection. That's the hidden truth about control. It's a fear of imperfection, masquerading as care. Letting go of it feels like learning to walk barefoot on gravel. Painful at first, but freeing once your feet toughen. At one point, he holds up a wrinkled shirt. "You'd never let me fold like this," he teases. I grin. "You're right, I'm evolving." He laughs, a deep, genuine sound I haven't heard in years. And just like that, something shifts again, not back to what we were, but toward what we could be. The next day, my sister drops by. She notices immediately. "You two look calm," she says suspiciously. "We're practicing selective communication," I joke. She rolls her eyes. "That sounds like therapy code for ignoring each other politely." I smirk. "Maybe, but it's working." She leans closer. "You know, Mom said she thought you'd leave him." I glance at her. I thought about it, I admit. But sometimes leaving isn't the only way to start over. People still debate whether staying can be as brave as walking away. I think it depends on what you're staying for, comfort or clarity. After she leaves, I find my husband fixing the loose cabinet door that's been broken for months. "You're on a roll," I say. He grins. "I figure if I fix enough small things, maybe we'll stop breaking big ones." I laugh softly, surprised by how simple that sounds and how true it feels. That night, rain taps gently on the windows. We sit side by side on the couch, the television playing some forgettable movie we don't watch. He turns to me suddenly. "You ever think we could be happy again?" I look at him carefully. "Define happy." He chuckles, less tense. "More us." I take a deep breath. "Maybe. But it'll have to be a new version of us. The old one didn't survive." He nods slowly, as if agreeing with something inevitable. Before going to bed, he says, "Thank you for not giving up on me." I smile, half asleep. Thank you for finally showing up. As I drift into dreams, I think of something I once read about in an old psychology journal. Marriages don't end when love dies. They end when curiosity does. Maybe that's why ours survived the silence. Because somewhere between the stillness and the storm, we started getting curious about each other again. And in that curiosity, we found something far quieter and far stronger than control. By now, silence has become less a wall and more a language we both understand. It's as if the air between us learned to translate meaning without sound. The mornings are softer, the evenings slower. We've built something new, not the old comfort of routine, but a fragile, conscious calm that demands both of us to show up differently. It's not perfect, but it's honest. And that honesty, however quiet, feels revolutionary. One Friday morning, I find him sitting at the table with a notebook open. His handwriting is uneven, the kind he usually hides behind typed lists. "What's that?" I ask. He glances up, embarrassed. "Just stuff I wanted to say but didn't know how." I raise an eyebrow. "You're writing it down." He nods. "You started with silence. I'm starting with paper." I can't help but smile. There's something beautifully human about two flawed people reinventing communication from scratch. He slides the notebook toward me and leaves the room. I open it hesitantly. Inside are short fragments, half thoughts, unfinished confessions. "I hated when you did everything because it made me feel useless. I miss your laughter. I didn't realize how much it filled the house. You weren't controlling. You were holding things together and I mistook it for control." I trace the words with my fingertips, my throat tightening. Sometimes written words carry more weight than spoken ones. They can't be erased mid-argument or softened by tone. They just sit there raw and unedited. That night, I return the gesture. I write my own letter, not to reply, but to mirror. I wasn't trying to control you. I was trying to stop everything from falling apart. But maybe I never gave you the chance to prove you could hold it too. I leave the note on his pillow. We don't speak of it the next morning, but the way he sets my coffee cup beside me, careful, deliberate, tells me he read it. There's a quiet pattern forming now we coexist in grace. We talk less but mean more. We touch less but linger longer. It's strange how silence makes every small gesture feel amplified, sacred even. Family therapists often talk about micro-repair behaviors, small, consistent acts that rebuild trust faster than grand gestures ever could. A cup of coffee, a shared laugh, a wordless understanding. That's what we're living now. On Sunday, we decide to visit his mother. She's a sharp, witty woman who has always had opinions about our marriage. As soon as we walk in, she squints. "You two look different," she says, quieter. I smile. "We're learning moderation," she laughs, "in talking or in arguing." Both my husband replies quickly, earning a glare from her and a smirk from me. Over dinner, she talks about old traditions, how her parents never fought in front of the children because silence kept dignity intact. I wonder how much of that silence also buried truth. People still debate whether family dignity is worth the price of emotional distance. Maybe her generation didn't know the difference. Driving home that night, he says softly, "You know, she called me last month, said she thought you were about to leave me." I glance at him. "And what did you say?" He smiles faintly. I said, "Maybe she should worry about me leaving me." I laugh, genuinely. It feels good to laugh with him again. Later that week, something unexpected happens. He comes home early holding a small potted plant. For the kitchen, he says awkwardly, "Something alive." I blink. "That's thoughtful." He shrugs. "You're not the only one who can do gestures." I set the plant on the counter, admiring its fragile green leaves. "You know I tease. You'll have to water it." "Already set an alarm," he says proudly, and for the first time in years, I believe he'll actually remember. In the evenings, we start cooking together something we never did before. It's clumsy, but intimate. He chops onions too big. I season too much. We argue lightly, laugh often. It's astonishing how the mundane can become romantic when both people are paying attention. One night, mid-dinner prep, he pauses and says, "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you never went silent?" I stir the sauce slowly. We'd still be pretending everything was fine. He nods, expression heavy with truth. "Then I'm glad you did." The next morning, I wake to find him writing again, the same notebook open beside a cup of coffee. He doesn't hide it this time. "What are you writing now?" I ask. "Just keeping track," he says, "of things I notice. things I used to ignore. I smile. Like what? He flips a page, like how you hum when you cook, or how you water the plants in a circle, not straight lines, or that you always check if the door's locked twice before bed. I laugh. You're taking notes on my quirks now. He grins. I'm studying the woman I thought I knew. There's something humbling about being seen again, not for perfection, but for presence. And in that moment, I realize how powerful silence truly was. It didn't punish, it recalibrated. It forced us both to confront who we'd become beneath the noise. Before bed that night, I find myself whispering into the dark, I'm proud of you. He chuckles softly. For what? For growing without needing me to tell you how. He reaches for my hand under the blanket. Took me long enough, he murmurs. And as sleep wraps around us, I think of an old saying. I once read, silence isn't the absence of sound. It's the presence of understanding. Maybe that's what this is, now not quiet out of fear, but peace born from recognition. We've learned to live not in control, not in chaos, but somewhere in the middle, a space where words are optional, and listening doesn't require sound. And maybe, just maybe, that's what real love sounds like after it learns how to breathe again. By autumn, the silence between us has evolved into something almost beautiful. It breathes, it listens, it holds space for both of us to exist without performance. The house no longer feels like a battleground or a vacuum. It feels alive, finally. I notice how sunlight lingers longer in the kitchen, how the air smells different, like coffee and forgiveness. Even the floorboards creak softer, as though they too have relaxed their tension. My husband and I don't speak constantly, but when we do, it's deliberate, weighted, and kind. Words have become currency again, not noise spent carelessly. One Saturday morning, I wake before him and make pancakes. He wanders in hair-messy eyes, half-closed, and grins like a boy. You're up early, he mumbles. Couldn't sleep, I reply, flipping another pancake. He sits down, watching me quietly, then says, I don't think I've seen you this calm in years. I pause. That's because I stopped trying to fix everything. He tilts his head. Doesn't that make you feel helpless? I smile faintly. No, it makes me feel human. People still debate whether detachment is a form of peace or a disguise for exhaustion. I'm not sure which one I'm living, but whatever it is, it's lighter. After breakfast, we take a walk around the neighborhood. The maple leaves have turned amber and red, crisping under our shoes as we walk side by side. There's a comfort in the quiet rhythm of our steps, the mutual understanding that not every silence is empty. He breaks it first. Sometimes I think you're too good at this whole silence thing. I chuckle. It's a skill. You could learn it. He grins. Oh, I am. But my teacher is terrifying. I laugh, elbowing him playfully. It's a small moment, but it feels monumental humor returning to a house that once only echoed with tension. At one point, he stops near a bench and sits down. You ever think about, before he asks, before the word control ruined everything, I sit beside him. Every day, I admit. But not because I miss it, because I'm still learning from it. He nods, slowly. I think I used that word to protect my pride. I didn't realize it would burn the bridge between us. I study his face. He's changed, less defensive, more reflective. The man who once needed to be right now seems content to be real. I say, I used to believe silence was weakness, that if I didn't speak, I'd disappear. But it turns out silence made me visible in a way words never could. There's a moment of stillness between us. The wind catches a few leaves and scatters them across the path like reminders that letting go can be beautiful too. He exhales deeply. You're stronger than me, he says. No, I answer softly, just quieter. When we get home, the mail is waiting, mostly bills and advertisements, but tucked among them is a small envelope with our names written in my mother's handwriting. Inside is a wedding photo, slightly yellowed, with a note, "You two were smiling so hard that day. Don't forget why." I hold the photo for a long time. We were young then, reckless, hopeful, invincible. I can almost hear the laughter from that day echoing faintly in the paper. We look like strangers, I whisper. He leans over my shoulder. Yeah, he says softly, but happy strangers. That night, we sit by the fireplace, our new ritual on weekends. The glow warms the room, flickering shadows across our faces. I bring out the journal I've been writing since the silence began. He gestures to it. Still documenting your side of the story, he teases. I nod. Someone has to. Mind if I read it? he asks cautiously. I think for a moment. Not yet, I say. Some of it isn't finished. He respects that. One thing I've learned, not everything needs to be shared to be understood. Later, as he stirs the fire, he says, "You ever notice how quiet can be addictive?" I smile. Addictive? Yeah. Once you stop filling space with words, you start noticing everything else. The sound of your own thoughts, the hum of the fridge, even the way wood pops in the fire. I nod, impressed. You're starting to sound like me. He grins. Careful. I might start winning arguments through silence, too. We both laugh, and in that laughter, I feel the ghost of our old selves return, not the version that broke, but the one that used to believe in each other. The next morning, I go through some old boxes in the attic, relics of a life built before chaos took over. There are receipts, postcards, silly notes we left each other when life was too busy to talk. One reads dinners in the oven. Don't burn it this time, with a smiley face doodle. Another says, missed you last night. Dreamed of pancakes. I find myself smiling through tears. These scraps of ordinary love are proof that we weren't always drowning. Sometimes even control was just care wearing the wrong mask. In the afternoon, he helps me clean the attic. He finds an old typewriter I used in college. Does this still work? He asks, dusting it off. Probably, I say. Why? He smiles slyly. Maybe I'll write our story, from my side. I laugh. That'll be short. Short but dramatic, he counters. You're forgetting I'm the misunderstood protagonist. I roll my eyes. Oh, please. If this were a movie, you'd be the guy everyone yells at halfway through. He grins. Yeah, but maybe I'd redeem myself in the final act. I look at him for a long moment. Maybe you already are. That evening, we cook again, pasta this time without burning the garlic. As we eat, he says, you know what I realized? You didn't go silent to punish me. You went silent to survive me. I stop mid-bite, stunned. That's not wrong. I think he continues, you were drowning and silence was the only way to catch your breath. I nod slowly. You're finally getting it. He chuckles. Yeah, I'm a slow learner. You're learning, I correct. After dinner, I light a candle and sit by the window. Outside, the wind rustles the trees like whispers of something divine. He joins me, placing a blanket over both our shoulders. You ever think we'll tell anyone about this? He asks. About what this season? The silence. The almost break. I shrug, maybe, but not as tragedy, as testimony. He frowns. Testimony that sometimes you have to lose your voice to hear your truth. He nods thoughtfully, and we sit like that for a long while. Two people wrapped in one blanket, no grand declarations, no promises, just a shared exhale. Before bed, I open my journal and add one more entry. He's learning to listen. I'm learning to let him. And somewhere between those lessons, we're finding our rhythm again. That night, I dream of our younger selves, standing at our wedding altar, smiling nervously, unaware of how silence one day would become our greatest teacher. I see us laughing under string lights, his hand around mine, the future ahead like an unwritten page. When I wake, he's asleep beside me, his hand still resting where it always did, as if it never left. I think about something I read in a book once. Every marriage speaks two languages, the one of words and the one of quiet endurance. For years, we spoke only the first. Now we finally understand the second. The silence that once broke us has become the rhythm that keeps us steady. And maybe that's what real love looks like. Not endless communication, not control, but the courage to sit in the quiet and still choose each other. By winter, silence has woven itself into the fabric of our lives so seamlessly that I barely notice it anymore. It's not the cold kind that freezes a room, it's the warm, steady kind, like a blanket that keeps everything from unraveling. Snow begins to fall outside the window, soft flakes tumbling onto the branches that line our yard. Inside, the house glows with a strange kind of peace. Not the loud cinematic kind people post about on social media, but the quiet domestic kind that grows only after surviving the storm. I'm baking bread when he walks in from work, cheeks red, from the windscarf crooked. Smells incredible, he says, shaking snow from his jacket. You're early, I reply, surprised. Wanted to be, he answers, simply placing his keys gently in the bowl by the door instead of tossing them like before. It's such a small act, but it feels monumental proof that he's finally treating our home like something alive, not just something that functions. We eat together that evening, and he talks more than usual. Not about news or work or sports, but about real things. Do you ever wonder, he says, what would have happened if I hadn't said it? That word, controlling. I smile faintly. I think we'd still be pretending everything was fine, and that might have been worse. He nods slowly, cutting into his bread. Maybe the word broke something, but maybe it also woke something up. Exactly, I say. Sometimes a fracture is the only way light gets in. He looks up surprised. You sound like a therapist. No, I reply, just someone who finally stopped apologizing for caring. There's something about winter that makes everything sharper. The light, the air, even self-awareness. The days are short, the nights long, and it forces people to slow down. We start spending our evenings in the living room wrapped in blankets, a small fire crackling in the fireplace. I notice how his habits have changed. He listens, more interrupts less. He doesn't fill silence with unnecessary words anymore. He even asks before assuming. It's almost funny how the very thing he once accused me of being, he's now practicing himself. Care disguised as control, now reborn as awareness. One night, as we sit watching the fire, he says, "You know, I was afraid that silence meant you stopped loving me." I turn to him, "And what do you think now? I think it meant you were saving what was left." I nod. "That's exactly it." He exhales shoulders, relaxing as though he's been waiting months to release that thought. We start talking about things we never had time for before. Childhood stories, mistakes, what we each thought love meant. He confesses that as a boy, he grew up in a house where silence was punishment, a form of exile. When my dad was mad, he wouldn't yell. He'd just stop talking. For days. I feel something inside me soften. So when I went quiet, I say, "You thought I was your father?" He nods. "Yeah, but I was wrong. You weren't punishing me. You were protecting yourself." There's a long pause. The fire cracks and sighs as if filling in the words we can't. It's strange how love becomes therapy when both people finally stop pretending they're fine. Later that week, we decide to do something impulsive, a weekend trip to the cabin where we spent our 5th anniversary. The place where years ago we promised each other a lifetime and left with mosquito bites and laughter. The drive there feels like déjà vu. The same winding roads, the same tiny gas station, halfway through the same playlist that used to make us sing loudly and off-key. But this time, there's no tension in the air, just quiet understanding. At the cabin, everything feels smaller but cozier. The wood creaks when we walk the fireplace, still stubborn to light, and the view of the frozen lake spreads out like glass. I watch him try to start a fire, and when he fails the first time, he laughs instead of cursing. "You've changed," I tell him. "You don't get angry as easily anymore." He smirks. "That's because I married a teacher." "A silent one," I say. "The worst kind," he jokes. We spend the evening cooking together badly. The pasta overcooks, the sauce thickens too much, but neither of us cares. When the lights flicker, we light candles and eat by hand like kids. "You know," he says, "I used to think we'd never recover, that we'd end up two strangers who just share bills." I laugh softly. "We almost did." "Yeah," he says, his voice low. "But then you stopped talking, and it forced me to listen to everything I'd ignored." I look at him, really look at him, and see not the man who hurt me, but the man who stayed to learn. "Do you forgive me?" he asks suddenly. I think about it. "I forgave you the day I stopped needing you to understand why I was hurt." "That sounds complicated," he says. "It's not," I reply. "Forgiveness isn't always reconciliation. Sometimes it's release. But you earned your way back." After dinner, we sit by the frozen window. The moonlight spills across the floor, illuminating the dust motes in the air. "Do you ever miss the noise?" he asks. I shake my head. "No. I think we mistook noise for connection." He nods. "Yeah, like static pretending to be music." "Exactly," I say, smiling. We were turning up the volume when we should have been tuning the frequency. He looks at me thoughtfully. "You're going to turn this into a story, aren't you?" I grin. "Maybe." People like stories about redemption, about silence that saves instead of destroys. "You think they'll believe it?" he asks. "They don't have to," I say. "They just have to feel it." That night, the cabin grows cold. The fire dies down, the wind howls outside, and yet the warmth between us stays. He lies beside me, his hand resting on my arm, not possessive, not seeking forgiveness, just present. I stare at the ceiling, tracing the faint glow of the dying embers, and think about how love ages. It doesn't fade the way people assume. It just changes texture from a shout to a whisper, from chaos to quiet endurance. In the morning, he surprises me again. He's already awake, standing by the window with coffee in hand. "It's snowing again," he says, voice soft. "It's like the world keeps erasing itself so we can start over." I walk over, watching the flakes dance in the wind. "Maybe that's what marriage is," I say. A series of small erasures and rewrites. He smiles. "If that's true, then I want to keep writing." We pack up and drive home, the silence between us now more like a melody than an absence. When we arrive, he takes my hand before getting out of the car. "I know it's not over," he says. "It never really is, but I want to keep learning this new language." I squeeze his hand. "Then let's promise to keep translating for each other." As we walk inside, the house feels warm again, not because of the heat, but because of what's returned: mutual presence. Love in its most adult form, not grand gestures or perfect communication, but the simple decision to stay curious. That night, I write the last page in my journal. We stopped speaking to find meaning. We stopped controlling to find trust. And in that pause, somewhere between noise and nothingness, we found us again. I close the notebook, place it on the shelf beside the potted plant he bought months ago. It's thriving now, green alive, quietly stretching toward the window light. And I realize something both simple and profound. Silence doesn't kill love. Indifference does. Silence, when chosen consciously, is just love catching its breath. The next morning, I wake to the sound of him humming again, this time while making coffee. I smile from the bed, eyes still half closed, thinking maybe we never needed to go back to who we were. Maybe the point was to grow into who we're becoming, two people who learned how to be quiet enough to finally hear each other. By the time spring rolls around, the silence that once felt heavy now hums like background music, gentle, familiar, essential. The house breathes again. It's strange how seasons can mirror emotion. The air outside feels tender, new, and so do we. The garden has started to bloom, little bursts of green, pushing through soil that was hard and frozen not long ago. Every time I water it, I think about how things return quietly without permission when you finally stop forcing them to grow. That's what we are now, a slow, patient regrowth. One morning, I find him kneeling in the garden, pruning the roses with an awkward kind of focus. He's wearing the gloves I bought him years ago that he never used. "You're up early," I say. "These thorns don't wait," he answers with a grin. I laugh, sitting beside him, watching as he carefully clips each stem. "Didn't think you'd ever learn patience," I tease. "Didn't think I'd ever need to," he replies softly. He hands me a rose. "You were right about silence," he says. "It wasn't punishment. It was a pause I didn't know I needed." It's odd hearing him reflect like this. The man who once filled space with noise now listens like someone who's met peace for the first time. I realize that my silence changed both of us. It stripped away all the posturing, the emotional clutter, the unspoken resentments. It forced us to sit inside the truth. Psychologists call it constructive withdrawal, the moment when silence becomes communication instead of avoidance. People still debate whether it's healthy or cruel, but I know what it did for us. It saved us from becoming polite strangers living parallel lives. After lunch, we take a walk down the street. Neighbors wave, unaware of the quiet revolution happening inside our home. "We look normal again," he jokes. "We're just better at pretending," I reply with a wink. He laughs. "You always say that." "Because it's true," I say. Normal is just what everyone pretends to be when they've survived something private. As we walk, a memory flashes our first apartment. Small, loud, full of dreams. We used to argue about dishes, bills, the temperature of the shower. Back then, those fights felt like proof of passion. Now I know they were just fear in disguise, two people terrified of being misunderstood. I tell him this, and he nods. "You know," he says, "I used to think passion was supposed to sound like shouting, but maybe it just sounds like staying." "Exactly," I say. Staying, even when it's uncomfortable. That night, we cook dinner with music playing softly in the background. It's an old record we used to love, slightly warped but still beautiful. He hums along off-key as ever. I set the table, light a candle, and catch my reflection in the glass window. I look older, calmer, wiser. Maybe a little sad, but in a peaceful way, the kind of sadness that comes with understanding instead of regret. He places the food down and sits across from me. "Do you think we'll ever go back to how we were?" he asks. I shake my head. "I don't want to." "Why not?" "Because we were asleep," I say simply. "Now we're awake." We eat quietly for a while. Outside, the wind brushes against the windows. After dinner, he surprises me with a small box. Don't panic, he says. It's not jewelry. Inside is a silver keychain engraved with one word, stillness. It reminded me of you, he says, shyly. I laugh. You're giving me silence as a gift now. You turned it into an art form, he replies. Might as well honor it. I smile and slip it into my palm, feeling its weight. Thank you, I whisper. It's such a simple thing, but it feels monumental, a shared acknowledgement of what we've endured and who we've become. Later, we sit on the porch watching the sun sink behind the trees. The air smells like rain, and the first drops begin to fall. He leans back, closing his eyes, and says, You ever notice how the world gets louder when it rains? I nod. Maybe that's why I love it. Nature doesn't fear us. It just lets it pass. He turns to me. Do you miss talking all the time I think about it? Sometimes. But I like who we are now more than who we were when we never shut up. He chuckles. You think our kids will ever understand this version of us? I smile. Probably not. They'll think we're boring. Maybe that's good, he says. Boring means peaceful. No, I say gently. Boring means healed. Inside, I notice the plant he bought months ago still thriving on the kitchen counter. Its leaves stretch toward the window light, bright and unbothered. I water it and think of how once I used to hover over it, constantly checking for growth every day. But it only started thriving when I stopped. That's the lesson, isn't it? Things grow best when they're trusted to do so. Love, too. Before bed, I open my old journal. The pages are nearly full words written in anger, grief, clarity, forgiveness. I start reading from the beginning. The first entry feels foreign now. He called me controlling. The pain in those words still hums faintly, but the echo no longer hurts. I turn page after page, watching my own evolution unfold, rage melting into understanding, despair into reflection. The last few pages are quieter, filled with gratitude and small observations. He listens now. I don't explain myself as much. The house feels warm again. I close the book and realize it's complete. The story is whole. He walks in towel around his shoulders, hair damp. Writing again, he asks. Just reading, I reply. It's done. He looks at me curiously. The story. The part where silence was survival, I say. Now it's just living. He nods slowly, processing. So, what happens next? I smile. We talk sometimes. We listen often. We stay quiet when it's enough. That's all. He sits beside me, arm brushing mine. I never told you this, he says quietly, but those first few nights of silence, I thought I'd lost you. It was like living with a ghost who looked like my wife, but wasn't her. I take his hand. Maybe you had to lose me to see me again. He squeezes my hand, eyes soft. Then I'm never looking away again. We sit like that hand in hand, listening to the rain tapping the windows, the faint creak of the floorboards, the steady rhythm of two people breathing in sync. And for the first time in years, I realize there's no anger left in me, no resentment, no scorekeeping. Just the quiet gratitude of survival. Before turning off the lights, I whisper, I don't think silence is the absence of love. I think it's the space where love rests between storms. He smiles, half asleep. Then let's rest here a while. And in the soft dark of that night, I understand something that took a lifetime to learn. Love doesn't thrive in control. It thrives in awareness. And when awareness meets patience, even silence becomes sacred. When I finally drift off to sleep, the house hums quietly around us, not in tension, but in harmony. The faucet no longer drips the air, no longer feels heavy, and the same silence that once felt like the end, has become the melody of everything we've learned to cherish. In the morning, the world feels new again. The sun filters through the curtains, the coffee brews in the kitchen, and he hums a tune I can't quite place. It's not perfect, neither of us are, but it's real. And maybe that's the quiet miracle of it all. After losing our voices, we finally learned how to listen, not just to each other, but to life itself. So here we are at the end of the story. You've sat with me through the silence, through the ache of what was said, and maybe more painfully, through what wasn't. It's strange to realize how much life happens in the quiet moments, the ones without words, without applause, just steady breathing and small forgivenesses. When I started this story, I thought silence would be the end of us, but it became something else entirely, the language of healing. You see, love doesn't collapse when people stop talking. It collapses when they stop listening. And I learned that sometimes you have to close your mouth, to finally hear what your heart has been screaming all along. Silence, when used right, isn't a wall, it's a bridge. It's where patience grows, where understanding blooms, where peace quietly returns. Now, our house still has its arguments, its bad days, its sighs, but it also has laughter again. The kind that comes softly like a song that doesn't need to prove it's beautiful. My husband and I still fall short sometimes, but we do it gently. We're no longer trying to control each other, just to coexist in kindness. If you've made it this far, maybe you've felt a bit of your own story echo here. Maybe you've been silent or silenced. Maybe you've had to learn that love doesn't always sound like words. It can also sound like the space between them. So before you go, remember, silence isn't empty. It's full of answers waiting for you to slow down and listen. To my listeners, my quiet believers, thank you for being here tonight. Take care of your peace, protect your stillness, and remember sometimes saying, nothing changes everything. Good night.